Subaru killed the STI. Yes, the car that won 6 titles in World Rally, the chariot of choice for vape bros that wanted to go fast, the car that built Subaru's entire legacy is long dead. Well, sort of. Subaru just announced a new STI, but not only is it ultra limited, it's also a CVT automatic. And well, Subaru fans aren't happy. And even though Subaru might be selling more cars now than ever, the old Subi crowd will tell you that the very soul, the thing that made a Subaru is gone. So how did Subaru go from being one of the most well-loved, cult-following car brands to just another car on the road? Well, the answer isn't found on the road at all. It's found on the dirt. This is the Subaru WRX STI, and well, it's known for doing this. But here's the thing. Subaru wasn't always making rally monsters. At first, they were just another Japanese car maker. Well, if I'm being totally honest, they started out making planes that were used to fight the Allies in World War II. Yeah, that didn't really work out well for them, did it? But after that, they began making basic, small econo boxes like the Subaru 360, aka the Ladybug, the Subaru Sambar, K-Truck, the front-wheel drive boxer-engined Subaru 1000, and later the Subaru FF1 Star. And it was with this little FF1 that Subaru's entire world was going to change. Because in 1970, a Japanese Subaru dealership was asked by Tohoku Electric Power Company to build a 4-wheel drive version of the FF1. The power company was sick and tired of using Jeeps that had no weather protection against the fierce snowy winters of northern Japan, and back then, regular consumer cars weren't really available with 4-wheel drive. That was pretty much just for trucks and heavy equipment. Now, a few years earlier, Nissan had bought a 20% stake in Subaru, so the Subaru engineers borrowed parts from the Nissan Bluebird, and they added a rear differential, transfer case, and drive shafts to the front-wheel drive FF1, thus making it 4-wheel drive. They built 5 for the power company and 3 for a local government office, but more importantly, they displayed it at the Tokyo Motor Show in 1971 with a mirror underneath, so people could see the amazing 4-wheel drive wizardry hiding in this tiny sedan, something that was unheard of back then. And well, people were very interested. So with proven interest in the research done, Subaru developed the successor to the FF1, the Subaru Leone, in 1971. It used an updated version of that same Subaru boxer engine, but this time, nearly all models were equipped with 4-wheel drive. And this was the one. People went nuts for the little Leone, and it became the North Star for Subaru over the next 40 years. Boxer engine? Check. 4-wheel drive? Check. Frameless windows? Check. They even had a truck version called the Subaru Brat, aka the Brumby, which, thanks to the chicken tax, probably deserves its own video entirely. If you want to see that, you can let me know in the Albon Discord. It's linked below the subscribe button. Now, the 4-wheel drive Leone was selling all over the world, especially in snowy places like Switzerland or Colorado, finally making Subaru a global name. And this was also about the time that Subaru began on its most important mission in their entire history, rally. And do you know what shoes they wore to drive those rally cars? Well, I actually have no idea if I'm being honest, but you know what shoes I would wear if I was rallying? Pilotis. Pilotis are my favorite lifestyle and driving shoes made by gearheads for gearheads. And they're not made for just looking good. These shoes are for going fast. If you catch me whipping the FD, I'll be wearing the Shift. Italian suede, lightweight, with a tread-inspired sole and the iconic Pilotti roll control heel to make sure I'm hitting every heel and toe. And of course, you know I had to get it in the Tennessee Pine to match the Mazda Montego Blue. If you're a track rat like Zane, you can go with the Icona, Pilotti's fitted driving shoe that is made for control and precision. Its multi-directional tread design makes for excellent grip on the pavement or the pedals and is unmatched for providing the pedal feel you need for precise throttle and brake control. And really, no matter what shoe you get, all Pilotis are purpose-built in Portugal with Italian suede and leather. Comfortable, stylish, and ready to race. So head to the link in our description and use code ALBON15 to get 15% off anything site-wide. An awesome deal that the Subaru Rally team definitely should have used, because when they first started out, they didn't exactly have much budget. In 1968, a small skunkworks group within Subaru was formed in order to take Subaru racing. They called the group Subaru Technica International, or STI. Not to be confused with the thing your doctor told you to stop getting.
It's chlamydia.
And STI took the Subaru FF1 and the Leone to a few rally events in the 70s. Now, they weren't committed to racing the full calendar, rather they used rally as a testbed for the Boxer engine. And eventually they formed Subaru Rally Team Japan, and this is where it gets good. It was run by Noriyuki Koseki, the founder of STI, and at the 1980 Safari Rally in Kenya, they entered a fully prepped Subaru Leone. It was the first time a four-wheel drive system was ever used in World Rally, and although they weren't exactly collecting trophies, they liked how the four-wheel drive system drove in the dirt. So, slowly but surely, they began to scale up their racing operations as they refined and improved their rally cars. And even though their best finish was only third place in 1987, they were improving at a steady pace. What they really needed was a car that had a little more to offer than the little Leone, a little more oomph. Subaru had a few models on sale like the XT and the Justy, but they didn't have a flagship car to compete with the big dogs. So in 1989, Subaru released the Legacy, aka the Liberty in Australia, a mid-sized car that was designed to go against the Camry and the Accord, which were selling like hotcakes in America. The Legacy was not only bigger than the Leone, it also had a much larger flat-4 engine as big as 2.2 liters, and in Japan, it was even offered with the EJ20T, a 220 horsepower 2-liter flat-4 turbo. The granddaddy of the EJ engines that lived in the future WRX STI right up until the day that Subaru killed it, which we'll get to soon. The Legacy was larger, more aerodynamic, and available as a sedan and a wagon, and people loved it. And not just the customers, the engineers at STI loved it too. They took the Legacy and souped it up, adding upgraded suspension and tires, fully forged internals, and hand-ported and polished heads, and they sold it as the Legacy RS Type RA. And to prove that it was a real sports car, they took a race-ready version to an oval track in the Arizona desert and ran the car flat out for over 18 days, covering over 60,000 miles at an average of 139 miles per hour. It was a Guinness World Record and a fantastic way to make a splash to sell their very first STI model. But that car wasn't just for breaking records. Subaru Rally Team Japan took the Legacy to the World Rally Championship, and this time, they were all in. They partnered with ProDrive to develop the Legacy RS rally car, and it used the same 2-liter turbo EJ engine, but now 300 horsepower in race trim. And in the 1990 season, they didn't win any races. They had one 4th place finish, but it's okay. It was just a start. In 1991, they had a 3rd place finish and 2 4th place finishes. And then in 1992, they signed a young Scottish man by the name of Colin McRae. Well, if you've ever heard the name, you know Subaru's luck was about to change. McRae and that Legacy RS won the British Rally Championship in 1992 and even took a couple of 2nd place finishes in the World Rally Championship. And then they won the British Rally Championship again in 93, this time with Richard Burns behind the wheel. Seemingly overnight, Subaru was becoming a real rally contender thanks to that light-footed Legacy. But the rally team was quickly realizing that the old Legacy just wasn't going to cut it next season. It was too heavy, too large for the tight rally stages, and competitors like Toyota, Ford, and Mitsubishi were really starting to outpace them. Lucky for the rally team, Subaru had been hard at work building a successor to the Leone. It was called the Impreza. Released in 1992, the Subaru Impreza was a big leap forward from the Leone. It was built on a shortened version of the Legacy platform and of course powered by a 4-cylinder Boxer engine. The car was, like its predecessors, front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, but it wouldn't be long before Subaru eliminated the front-wheel drive model entirely. Their brand was quickly becoming known as the rugged adventurous car, and all-wheel drive was a huge part of that. And along with the standard Impreza, they also released an all-new trim. It was inspired by Subaru's rally escapades, and they called it the World Rally Experimental, the WRX. It was a 237 horsepower turbocharged Impreza paired to a full-time all-wheel drive system with limited slip differentials. And man, this thing was quick, perhaps even quick enough to finally win on a rally stage. And well, in 1993, the Subi Rally team was about to find out. They debuted the Impreza rally car at Rally Finland that year, driven by Markku Allen and Ari Vatanen. Allen crashed out on the first stage, but Ari Vatanen figured out that Impreza and was absolutely ripping through the Finnish countryside. And in its first race ever, the Impreza got within spitting distance of a win, just barely finishing in second place. Still, a massive achievement for its first time out, and that little taste of glory was a strong enough drug that the Subaru rally team needed more. But that glory would have to wait, because Subaru's overall sales in the 90s, well, they kinda sucked. Subaru did okay as a small company in the 70s and 80s, but now Toyota and Honda were absolutely eating their lunch. Subaru had to think of something fast to keep the company out of the red, and they knew they appealed to niche groups, outdoorsy people, skiers, but after running a few focus groups, they realized there was another niche that bought Subarus at a higher rate than anyone else: lesbians.
What?
For whatever reason, a Subi just really fit the stereotypical lifestyle of a white American lesbian. And so Subaru decided this was the market that was going to save them. Now, here's the thing. This was the 1990s and there was still significant stigma around homosexuality, so Subaru knew they had to be sneaky about it. The ads needed to speak to their target demographic while not offending the sensibilities of 1990s Americans. And so they began a campaign of Subaru print ads with subtle nods to their lesbian customers. Different drivers, different roads, one car. Innocent enough, but look closely and you'll find a rainbow bumper sticker and a Xena Lover license plate, a nod to Xena Warrior Princess, who was also apparently lesbian, something I didn't pick up on as a 5-year-old. There were also other slogans like "Get Out" and "Stay Out," or "It's not a choice, it's just the way we're built," which was honestly super clever and a very bold appeal for the 1990s. And wouldn't you know it, the ad campaign was a huge success. Subaru sales were starting to pick back up and things were finally starting to look up for the company. But that success wasn't just in the dealerships. The Subaru rally team was starting to see the fruits of their efforts too. In 1994, Carlos Sainz Sr. joined Colin McRae on the Subaru rally team. And Sainz brought Subaru their first gold at the Acropolis Rally that year. The Impreza was performing the best it ever had, and Subaru fought hard with Toyota in their Celica GT4. But in the end, the Celica was just simply faster than the Impreza, and so Subaru finished second in the manufacturer's title, with Sainz and McRae placing second and fourth in the Drivers' Championship. So close, but also just not quite there. Of course, later we would find out that Toyota was cheating that season and were making way more horsepower than anyone else. But if you want to know about that, then you should watch the Toyota Motorsports video we made, which I'll link below the like button. Anyways, along with the rally team success, STI wanted to make the road-going Impreza WRX better too, so in 1994, Subaru released the WRX STI. The STI team would take the WRXs from the factory and slap them with a full STI catalog. They meant more horsepower, upgraded suspension, different transmission, and they also released the Type RA version, which was fully stripped out. No sound deadening, no AC, no radio, and it made even more horsepower, 271 to be precise. But the real highlight, that was the driver-controlled center differential. One of the first of its kind, it allowed the driver to adjust the lockup of the center differential depending on what kind of terrain they were racing on. And it was the closest thing you could get to being Carlos Sainz in that number 5 Impreza. Speaking of which, Carlos Sainz actually won the 95 WRC season opener at Monte Carlo, and then won again in Rally Portugal. McRae won Rally New Zealand and placed second in Australia, and Rally Catalunya was an insane 1-2-3 finish for Sainz, McRae, and Piero Liati in their Subaru. Subaru became such a dominant force in WRC that going into the last race of the season, the competition wasn't even with the other teams. McRae and Sainz were both tied for points, well ahead of everyone else, and the two teammates were battling each other for the Drivers' Championship. In the end, Colin McRae just inched out Carlos Sainz's time and won his first ever World Rally Championship. And Subaru handily took the Constructors' Championship as well, beating out Mitsubishi by 43 points. Subaru UK was so proud of the Scottish McRae that they built a Series McRae Impreza in '95 to celebrate his success. It was mostly wheels and badges, but it came in Rally Blue, which was previously only a color on the race car, a color that later became iconic to Subaru performance cars. For the 1996 season, Sainz left to Ford and Colin McRae became the lead driver at Subaru. And well, things didn't go quite as well as last season. McRae didn't get a win until the fourth race and often found himself behind Tommi Mäkinen in the insanely quick Mitsubishi Evo 3. But kept fighting, and eventually the team managed to defend Subaru's Constructors' Championship, but Colin McRae finished second in the Drivers' Championship, with Tommi Mäkinen and the Mitsubishi clinching their first ever title win. Thankfully, no matter what the outcome of the rally season was, the road-going cars always benefited from the rally program, and Subaru as a company was finally coming into their stride. They were posting the largest year-over-year sales increase of any manufacturer, and 1996 was their best financial performance in their entire 29-year history. The plan was working. The STI models were selling nicely in Japan, the Legacy wagon was the best-selling wagon in the US, and Subaru was doubling down on being the adventurer's car, becoming the official car of the US ski team and the International Mountain Biking Association. Of course, we didn't get the WRX or the STI in the US, but come 1997, Subaru released the Impreza 2.5 RS. Not quite an STI, but much closer to what the Lucky Ducks in Japan were getting. And well, 1997 was cake and champagne every day at the Subaru headquarters. There was just one person who wasn't sharing in the celebrations: Colin McRae. Because, well, the poor Scottish lot of parts just couldn't beat Mäkinen and that Mitsubishi. Just like 96, the 97 season ended with Subaru winning the Constructors' title, but Colin McRae losing to Tommi Mäkinen in the Drivers' Championship, this time by 1 point. So 1998 was the final straw for McRae. If he couldn't beat those Red Menaces, this was it for him. And man, did he drive that Impreza hard. He took wins in Portugal, Greece, Corsica, but the Impreza failed him just too many times, and he started to fall farther and farther behind Team Red. And when it was all said and done, Subaru and Colin both finished third, and it was finally starting to rain on the Subaru Rally Parade. Colin McRae didn't stick around and jumped ship to Ford to see if he had a better title shot there, and well, things just weren't looking good for Subaru in the world of motorsports. On the flip side, 1998 was Subaru's 40th anniversary, and even though the rally team was in a bit of a rut, they were finally making enough money to buy themselves something nice. And much like a frat bro at Texas Tech, that birthday present was the STI of STIs, the 22B. Now, when I say this was the most special car that Subaru ever made, I mean it. It was a factory WRX STI coupe, but with the rally car's 80mm wider wide-body kit and finished in the iconic World Rally Blue. Under the hood was the EJ22G, a 2.2-liter flat-4 turbo making a gentlemanly 276 horsepower thanks to Japanese regulations, which in reality was closer to 300. It had Bilstein suspension, a huge rear wing, big ol' STI brakes, and while there aren't any official specs, it was said to do 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds. In 1998! That was faster than a Supra or an NSX, and all of this could be yours if you could afford it. It was in Japan only, of course, and sold for about $42,000 US at the time, and in today's money, that's roughly $80,000 US. Wonder how much they sell for now.
What the hell?
That's a lot of money for a car that lost the championship to an Evo. But even with the amazing 22B unleashed on the streets, the rally team was still struggling. 1999 saw Subaru lose once again, this time to Toyota by just 4 points, and 2000 and 2001 weren't exactly much better. At this point, Subaru's attention was starting to shift from rally. And the highlight of that year had nothing to do with WRC, it had to do with Nissan. Specifically, Nissan was selling its stake in Fuji Heavy Industries, Subaru's parent company, as part of their merger with Renault. And well, who did they sell it to? Well, the one brand that owned every other car maker in the 2000s, General Motors. The deal was done in 1999, and it marked the beginning of a very interesting time at Subaru. They released the all-new Impreza with a new, generally disliked front fascia that people began calling the bug eye. But along with that came the 2-liter turbo WRX, which, joy of joys, was finally available in the US for the 2002 model year. My brother had one, and he spent his days making choo-choo noises with his Apexi blow-off valve until he eventually blew up the transmission. But while we finally had a WRX, we still didn't get an STI. At least, not yet. What we did get were a few strange new models, like the Subaru Baja in 2003, which in retrospect was actually kind of cool, and in 2004 we got the Saab 92X, which might get you thinking, Saab? That isn't a Subaru or a Chevy. To which I would reply, you are absolutely wrong, it's both. I'll have to make a video about that later, but the real highlight of the GM era was that in 2004, we finally got the WRX STI in America. And perhaps best of all, Subaru had ProDrive, their rally partner, redesign the bug eye Impreza, and they came up with the blob eye. It looked so much better than the old design, and it was a great start for the STI in the States. It also had an EJ25 2.5-liter turbo boxer instead of the 2-liter they got in Japan, because in America there ain't no replacement for displacement. And even though the 2-liter was far more reliable, you couldn't argue with 300 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. It was paired to an excellent snicky 6-speed manual with the most advanced electronically controlled differential that Subaru had ever made. And the result of all this was a rocket of a car that went head-to-head with the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 8. A rivalry that created some of the best Clarkson-era Top Gear segments
in the world.
2005 was also the year that GM decided to sell their stake in Subaru. Turns out, buying a million different car companies and making crappy rebadges of all their cars wasn't a good business model. So Subaru sold 60% of their Subaru holdings back to Fuji Heavy Industries and sold the rest of it to Toyota. Yes, now Toyota was a major stakeholder in Subaru, and this little partnership would soon bear some delicious sports car fruit, but more on that later. First, the Impreza, which in 2006 was facelifted yet again, this time by ex-Alfa Romeo designer Andreas Zapatinas, who penned the best-looking new-age Impreza yet, the Hawkeye. Mechanically, it was largely the same with a few minor updates, but in my opinion, this was peak Subaru. My brother had one of these STIs, and to this day, I still remember the insane sounds of unequal length header burble along with a screaming open wastegate. And Subaru's entire lineup was pretty sick in this era. There was a Forester XT and then a Legacy GT, both with body kits and hotted up turbo engines. And along with all this new kit on the road, you'd expect the rally teams to be kicking butt as well, right? Not really. Tommy Mäkinen left the red team and joined the blue team back in 2002, but he had terrible luck with Subaru. He only managed to finish 6 races that year. The 2003 season wasn't quite so bad, with the other Subaru driver Peter Solberg winning the Drivers' Championship, but Tommy Mäkinen just couldn't perform in a Subaru like he did in an Evo, which for him was proof that it was time to hang up the jersey. So at the end of the season, he retired from WRC. The 04 and 05 seasons were more of the same, a strong showing, but Subaru just couldn't manage to clinch title wins, and it really seemed like the team was showing its age. Year after year, they found themselves in 2nd or 3rd place, always just out of reach of victory, but close enough to keep them trying again the next year. 2006 was the season that would finally give them the answer to the question everyone was still asking, is Subaru still good enough? There were major rule changes this season, and it required a fairly significant reworking of the WRC car. As such, the season started with unexpected mechanical failures, knocking them out of the first 2 races. Subaru started to feel the pressure and quickly replaced the team principal, despite the fact that he'd been running the team for decades. Bit of an odd move, and unsurprisingly, one that didn't help. Peter Solberg bravely piloted that car to a couple of 2nd place finishes, but in the end, he had 0 wins and came 6th in the Drivers' Championship, their worst result yet. And 2007 was honestly more of the same. The 08 season ain't even worth talking about. Luckily, Subaru's suckiness was conveniently overshadowed by the 2008 financial crisis, all of which compounded to a point where the suits in Japan officially announced that Subaru would be retiring from the World Rally Championship. Now, before you get sad, this was also the year we got the new STI hatch. Okay, Probably not a great consolation prize considering Subaru's leaving the one sport that basically defined their brand for the last 30 odd years. Also, I like the Hawkeye sedan better than the hatch anyways. But all that aside, the reality was Subaru realized they were dumping money into a losing rally program that just wasn't financially viable. And on top of that, it also wasn't really helping them sell any cars, with the annual sales of the STI being nearly half of what it was a few years prior. There was one silver lining though. The STI team still had racing aspirations, so they convinced Subaru to let them start competing in the 24 hours of Nurburgring. They entered a fully prepped STI in the SP6 class, and despite being up against many more powerful cars, they came 5th in their class and 57th overall. Pretty fantastic for a rookie season. They kept at it too, and in 2011 they won the SP3T class and then again in 2012. You see, the STI team had always believed that continuing to have a real background in motorsports would be the research they needed to continue improving the road car. And they weren't wrong. In 2012, the WRX and STI were updated once again. Subaru couldn't make up their minds and made it a sedan again, but regardless, here was another new STI and it improved on the classic formula. But there was another car in the works that was even more important, in my opinion. A secret skunkworks project done by a team of Subaru and Toyota engineers. You see, the story goes, Toyota wanted to get back into the sports car game, and considering they kinda owned Subaru, they seemed like the best people to work with. Toyota wanted a lightweight, nimble rear-wheel drive coupe, and so the engineers took a Subaru Legacy, cut it in half, and made it rear-wheel drive. The Subaru engineers were skeptical since this was neither turbo nor all-wheel drive, but after one spin in that Frankenstein Legacy, everyone was on board. The result of that project was the 2012 release of the Toyota 86 and Subaru BRZ twins, also called the Scion FRS and Toyota GT86, and then later Toyota GR86. Regardless, this was Toyota's big re-entry into the affordable sports car scene, and it was cheap, lightweight, with a relatively simple 2-liter flat-4 Subaru engine that made 200 horsepower. Of course, now that engine's only claim to fame is spinning rod bearings and blowing up, but regardless, that car was fantastic and I own 2 of them. And the 86 twins also sold very well. It was another feather in Subaru's cap as they continued growing as a brand. And building on that momentum, in 2014 Subaru made a big announcement. The WRX and STI were no longer going to be on the Impreza chassis, they were going to be their own thing. This was a big deal because it meant that Subaru was still committed to developing performance cars for enthusiasts no matter the cost. Except they kinda lied about that. What they did do was drop the Impreza name from the model lineup, so now it was just a Subaru WRX instead of an Impreza WRX, but the underlying car was still an Impreza. And while that seemed like a little bit of a harmless half-truth at the time, it was a sign that Subaru was actually trending in the wrong direction. The STI was heading towards its own demise. Of course, it wasn't dead quite yet. In 2015, they released an updated WRX and STI on the new Impreza platform, and while the STI was basically an iteration of the old formula, the WRX was the one that actually saw some special attention. For the first time in history, the WRX didn't have an EJ engine under the hood. Now, it came with the new FA20 DIT, a 2-liter turbo direct-injected flat-4 sharing the FA architecture with the FA20 and the BRZ and FRS. And well, it was pretty solid. It made decent power in a wide torque curve and now finally came with a 6-speed manual and optional CVT automatic. And honestly, things were pretty good in Subaru land. Their efforts in the 24 hours of Nurburgring were paying off as well, winning their class in 2015, 16, 18, 19, and to commemorate their racing success, in 2019, they released the S209 STI. Now, the S-Series had been going on for years in Japan, but the S209 was the first one to be released in the US. And it was a huge deal because we never get the cool special model, but considering this one cost $64,000, it seemed like a horrible idea for a tarted up STI. But this was a car that required a closer look. The carbon roof, carbon wing, the canards, the suspension, all of it came from the Nurburgring race car. The engine was built to make 341 horsepower and 330 pound-feet, more than any of the standard STIs before it. And many reviewers have said that this was the best driving car that Subaru had ever made. A true driver's car that was far more than the sum of its parts, and Subaru built just 209 of them. And well, they sold every single one. Little did we know though, this special Subi showing up on American soil wasn't a blessing, it was an omen. The S209 ended up being a swan song for the STI because this beautiful little rally rocket wasn't going to make it another generation. In March of 2022, Subaru released an all-new VB generation WRX. Along with it, announced that they would not be making a WRX STI. They quoted tightening emissions regulations as the reason, and they said that a new STI just wouldn't be sold long enough to justify making it. And so, all we were left with was this, the new WRX. And well, it's got a face only a mother could love. For some reason, Subaru doubled down on the Outback look and added copious black plastic cladding to the body of the new WRX. Maybe it's just been so long since the designers saw a real rally car that they forgot what one looked like. Thankfully, under the hood was an all-new FA24 2.4-liter turbo engine, now making 271 horsepower and still connected to a 6-speed manual, or yes, a CVT. But for some strange reason, the highest trim model only came with a CVT. Surely the data showed that the Subaru crowd defaulted to the 6-speed manual, but Subaru still kept trying to push their horrible CVT onto us. Despite that, Subaru still had skin in the motorsports game. STI continued to race the WRX at the Nurburgring, and in 2024 won the SP4T class for the first time. And as of last year, they announced a WRX TS, aka tuned by STI, which is thankfully a top-spec manual transmission WRX with Brembo brakes and electronic dampers. And while it's the best VB WRX yet, it still doesn't really impress compared to its rivals. And most certainly isn't an STI. Well, until now. Just a few weeks ago, Subaru announced that they could be releasing a brand new STI. Sort of. Technically, it's just a prototype right now, one that should evolve into the latest S210 Special Edition STI, and one that features a beefed up 300 horsepower version of the top trim WRX's 2.4 liter. But again, all of that is routed through a CVT automatic gearbox. Now, I have no doubt that Subaru thinks this CVT is the best thing since sliced bread, but for car enthusiasts, this is purely lipstick on a pig. Gearheads couldn't care less about shift speeds, let alone through a rubber banding CVT. If we did, then we'd only be buying Porsches with PDK. Why would it ever make sense to build a car for enthusiasts for pure driving enjoyment and then completely nerf that enjoyment with a CVT, especially when a manual transmission is ready and available in their other car? Here's the thing though, I don't think Subaru really cares about enthusiasts. And why should they? Subaru is selling more cars now than they ever have. Subarus are the de facto adventure enthusiast, pet lover, family car around the globe now. Hell, last month Subaru of America announced that they've had 29 consecutive months of sales growth. And if you look at the lineup, it makes sense why. They've grown from having just one wagon and one sedan to a full lineup of SUVs in every size and shape, multiple sedans, and even an EV. Not a very good EV, but hey, it's there. And while the performance section of the website consists of the new BRZ and WRX, they could honestly get rid of both of those cars and it would hardly affect their bottom line. And with this new STI being Japan only and limited to 500 units, it may as well not exist at all. And well, that's the big thing. This whole video I've been going on and on about how it's this unbroken thread between motorsports and road cars that keeps a company alive and thriving. But if you look at sales, that simply isn't true. So why then do I keep talking about this in basically every video I put out on this channel? Well, because while Subaru's sales are alive and thriving, many enthusiasts feel that their identity, that magic, their very soul, is slowly withering away. Of course, Subaru is different from your Nissans and Mitsubishis. Subi's regular cars are still kind of interesting. And Subaru has done a great job of creating a model lineup that speaks to people's identities. But drive any standard Subaru, literally any of them, and you'll find that it's the same boring, lifeless, droney CVT driving experience across the board. And sure, it's not like Corollas and Camrys are exciting to drive, but what happened to the Forester XTs, the Legacy GTs? Why does the WRX now feel like a neglected middle child? Why is its rally heritage hardly recognizable anymore? Well, the answer, of course, is money. Every car maker needs to make more and more money. It's their obligation to their shareholders, and Subaru is doing a great job of it, despite being the smaller, scrappier car maker among these Japanese giants. But with Toyota coming out with new fully internal combustion engine sports cars every couple of years, and Honda continuing to build their Type R Civics and Integra Type S's, I can't help but think that Subaru is just making excuses. Excuses that continue to alienate them from the passionate Subaru enthusiast. The ones who would spend any amount of money to drive what Colin McRae drove, the guy who would happily swap another EJ into his STI after blowing it up for the 5th time, all to chase that high of feeling like a rally driver one more time. A fate that might just lead Subaru to end up a lot like Mitsubishi, which, if you don't know about, you can watch our video on their amazing rise and heartbreaking fall here. Thanks for watching.